Hello, everybody, and welcome into a Super Bowl edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass. I'm Evan Lazar, joined as always by Alex Barth, and we're waiting for the man of the hour. He'll be here just in a few moments, but we're going to open up the show talking about a few Patriots things that are still lingering here, maybe some Joe Judge, but I wanted to start with what we saw from Mac Jones. I don't know if a lot of people saw it. We didn't talk a lot of Pro Bowl on Tuesday. I don't care about the Pro Bowl, right? I can take it or leave it with the Pro Bowl.
I don't even care about the Pro Bowl.
We have talked a little bit about Alex Mac Jones's mic'd up segments, the clear, just fun he had playing that game. And I would venture to say that I don't know if Mac Jones had that much fun the entire season. I'm not trying to go, oh, the Patriots aren't fun and all that kind of stuff. That's not where I'm going with it. I'm more talking about just the pressures of a rookie season and being the quarterback and all that kind of stuff. We saw a much different, a much looser, much just fun and cool. I would say cool. I know this is crazy that we're talking about it like this, but I do find it interesting.
Yeah, for me, I thought maybe at times this year Mac was tight, just a little tight. Yeah. And I think that's tough. He's a rookie quarterback. He had a lot on his plate. I get it. I think playing a little looser could help him. I do. And I don't know that he needs to be as loose as he was in the Pro Bowl, but just knowing he has that in him. And you saw the way guys gravitated towards it, right? Even guys like Patrick Mahomes, Chandler Jones tweeted after the game that he became a big fan of Mac. So maybe a little recruiting there too.
Yeah.
For Mac, kind of showing that, hey, it can be fun in New England. Come play with me and we can have fun like this. Yeah, I would like to see that side a little bit more of Mac in year two, because it would just be a good sign that he's more confident. He understands what he's doing, all of that.
Well, it's a good segue. We got the man of the hour. We got Mr. Mike Petraglia himself coming from Los Angeles, the pride of the Cincinnati Bengals, the leader of the pack for Cincinnati in LA. It's Trags. We're so happy to have Trags on today and do this. The three of us back together again for the first time in a very, very long time. It's exciting for the three of us. I hope it's exciting for everybody else watching. But Trags, how's it going, man? How's LA?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm so happy to see Alex Barth on this podcast, and I'm going to rip him. I'm going to rip him. Anyway,
well, this was your podcast. We had to take it over.
I know that. Yeah,
I know you did. I know you did, and you've done a fantastic job. And if John Zanis is watching this, kudos to you both. I could not have hand-selected two people to carry on the tradition of Patriots Beat on CLNS Media any better than you two fine gentlemen. It is beautiful out here in Los Angeles. To your initial question, Evan, it is 75 right now at what are we? I was late on this podcast, by the way, and my deepest regrets and apologies. 9:12
Diva over here.
Yep, that's what I am. It is 75 degrees at 9:12 in the morning. Not bad. We're expecting, by the way, possibly record warmth for the Super Bowl on Sunday. Now, some perspective on this, because the first Super Bowl I ever covered, Super Bowl 30, was in Tempe before Glendale. And that was at Arizona State University's football stadium. I sat in the auxiliary press box, last row, no shade, okay? No shade. And it must have been 110 degrees, no kidding, without any awning or any protection over us. That's the hottest I will have ever been, and that will never be topped at a football game. So Sunday, if it's 85 degrees outside, it'll be about 75 indoors in a beautiful state-of-the-art facility. And I really genuinely, guys, am looking forward to Sunday to see how the two sides kind of match up against one another. These are obviously two coaches that know each other, and maybe it can be said that Zach Taylor knows what Sean McVay is as a head coach. Sean McVay hasn't played against or coached against Zach Taylor, the head coach. He knows what he was as a quarterback's coach. It's a different animal than running the entire program. And Zach Taylor, obviously, I think, has done an incredible job helping to get the Bengals to this point so far.
So let's go from there.
Yeah.
Because last year, I know, I personally wasn't high on Zach Taylor. I know you weren't high on Zach Taylor. I know there's new personnel, But what's the biggest difference between Zach Taylor last year and Zach Taylor this year?
Healthy Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. He can do the things. You guys are very, very familiar with the offense that Zach Taylor wants to run, and he has run it to perfection with Brian Callahan, with Dan Picture, who I had a good conversation with earlier in the week via Zoom. He has the kind of people here in place in a third year that's made the difference. And obviously Joe Burrow being healthy and not tearing his ACL like he did in 2020, that's a big part of it. But guys, I will tell you, the biggest change in this team, 2021 from 2020, is the defense. They went out, they spent them, much like the Patriots did, spent the money on the defense. Difference being, I think, the Bengals had enough personnel that they weren't relying entirely on one or two players. I think with the Patriots, maybe, the theory is Matt Judon wore out towards the end of the year, was not as effective as he was in the first half of the year for the Patriots. And with the Bengals, you have younger players. Von Bell's only 25. People forget that, but he's only 25. Jesse Bates is only 24. And then you have Chidobe Awuzie, and Eli Apple has been reborn here in Cincinnati under Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator. Trey Hendrickson followed up his great year in New Orleans with a career year this year, 13 and a half sacks. He's been a force on the edge. And then you have guys like, DJ Reader and Larry Ogunjobi. Ogunjobi, of course, is injured, won't play. But you have guys like that, and you have Sam Hubbard on the other end. So Bengals have a lot of depth on that defense. And to me, that's been the biggest difference this year.
Trags, what number Super Bowl is this for you actually covering in person?
I want to say 12.
12. So you've been to quite a few of these things, that humble brag. What's the vibe like out there? Because I'm curious with COVID and everything that's going on still in the world, it sounded like, based off of what I was hearing, that Radio Row was going to be quite subdued. I know ESPN and NFL Network, I think, are hanging at their facilities, obviously, with it being in LA and not having a physical presence at Radio Row necessarily. So is this totally different than, let's say, Alex and I were both lucky to be there in 2019 when the Patriots played the Rams, for example?
Much different, guys. Much different. It is subdued. It is quiet. Some of that's the LA vibe, maybe the LA scene where, Evan, you know it very well. The culture out here is to really chill till the big event. And that's what I think is we're building up to. Guys, there's not a lot of hype around this game. The LA Rams, I'm telling you right now, there isn't a lot. I've had rideshare rides from being out at night. And when I get in these cars, the drivers are saying, there's not any real LA Rams fans out here. They're all transplants. There's no fever. There's no excitement around the LA Rams. And I find that a little bit surprising. And he's like, if you're in from Cincinnati, the Bengal fans are going to be heard loud and clear on Sunday. And, that's part of the vibe out here. I think part of the vibe is, let's see what kind of game we're going to get on Sunday. But I don't expect any real electricity to build until maybe, the day before the game on Saturday.
Well, the general buzz too. I mean, do you think Brady's retirement announcement maybe took away some of the focus from the game itself?
No, I don't. I think this would have been that way one way or another, Alex. I think that it's the culture. That's the way it is out here in Southern California. And people are just waiting for the game to get here, and we are filling time. We're filling stories, talking to players, coaches, 8th grade Pee Wee Pop Warner coaches to kind of fill our storylines, right? And that's really what it's been a lot about. I'll tell you, the media room here is there's a lot more space than there has been in years past. It's not nearly as crowded.
Yeah, and the best way I can describe LA is LA has some of the worst traffic in the entire country, right? It is a driving city. There's not a lot of public transportation. It has some of the worst traffic in the entire country, and nobody gets pissed off on the road, right? There's no honking. There's no flipping people off. There's no mass holes. There's nothing because everybody is just super chill, man, right? That was the funniest thing to me is that the traffic was arguably twice as bad at times than what it is here in Boston. But here in Boston, you get in somebody's way, you know what happens, right? Out in LA, it's just like, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go. You want to cut me off? Like, no problem.
You know why that is? You know why that is, Evan?
The weather. It's the weather.
Yes, it is the weather. It is absolutely the weather. People are more chill. And that's why when I say, what's the vibe out here? What's the feeling? The feeling is, okay, there's a Super Bowl. There's a big game on Sunday. Right. When it gets here, I'll pay attention. But until then, I'm not going to get hyped up about it. And
the other thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, the other thing I would just say about the LA culture is that, believe it or not, as big as the Super Bowl is for all of us and as big as the Super Bowl is for everybody in this country, LA's got other things going on. Right? Like LA the Super Bowl is just like another event to these people, right? Because every year when you get rolling through in LA, you have the Oscars, you have the Grammys, you have there's so many other things, and entertainment is such a big part of it, not just sports, but Hollywood entertainment, that something like the Super Bowl in LA is just another big event of a string of big events that they have in every year out there. So football, I was surprised when they decided to move not just one, but two teams to Los Angeles, because I'm confused as to where it fits into the culture there, right? They don't need other teams. I think the Lakers and the Dodgers have real diehard fans.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, but in terms of like, do they need a football team in Los Angeles?
Do they need two?
Definitely no.
Right. They went from not being able to support one to overnight, suddenly they could support two. And Trags, it's funny. You said what you said, the Uber drivers or whatever telling you that, there's no real Rams fans. The Rams are the more popular of the two teams in that city, right?
Yes. There's no question about that, Alex.
It should be a home game for the Bengals.
I don't know where the Charger fans are. I mean, you would expect to have seen some Charger memorabilia around here. There's almost none, and obviously the Rams. Yeah, and right. And there are, Go Rams signage on public transportation on some of the buildings around, but not a lot of it. I mean, and I'm a walker. You guys both know. I do use public transit even here, and it's been very convenient for me. But you don't, I'm safe. You don't see signage all over the place for the Rams. You just don't. I mean, it's here and there, certainly, but that's about it. It surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but it surprises me, right? Like, you would think that the city would try to take over the team a little bit, especially with how good they are, but you could not possibly set it up any better than having a team in the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford and then Justin Herbert as the other quarterback on the team. Those are two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Right, and two of the more exciting teams in the NFL from a passing game standpoint, and all these types of things, and it still doesn't matter. Trags, before we brought,
hang on, real quick, Trags. Let me ask you this: there a big Detroit presence there?
No, and I know where you're going with that. No,
it's as close as they might get. I know a bunch of Detroit fans went out to the NFC Championship game. So,
Janie's my older daughter, as you know, goes to Miami of Ohio. Her boyfriend is a huge Lions fan and is killing me about Matthew Stafford's going to carve up the Bengals. And to which I said, did you see the jump ball that he threw in the third quarter, Chirag? That's what I think the Bengals are counting on Sunday, is that Matthew Stafford is going to throw a jump ball or two or three, and the Bengals need to take advantage of it, unlike the 49ers were not able to in the NFC title game.
Travis, before we brought you on, we were talking about Mac Jones at the Pro Bowl. I don't know if you saw any of the videos and stuff like that, but he had a pretty good time, right? He had a pretty good time, and it was a lot looser, he was kind of the star of the show, honestly. I watched the mic'd up segment that they did about 20 minutes, and I'd say 10 minutes of it is Mac Jones, not Patrick Mahomes, not Justin Herbert. It was Mac stealing a lot of the attention. I wanted to bring that towards Joe Burrow, because I think the thing that we hear so much about Joe Burrow is he's got this swagger, right? He's got this confidence, he's got this swagger, and I'm not sure that we necessarily saw that fully from Mac Jones as a rookie. That bravado, right? That really the gusto and the confidence. When you hear that Joe Burrow has swagger, what does that mean to you, right? And how do you kind of see that emulate itself on the field?
He's going to make the right play or the big play at the right moment. That's where, when people ask me, and they've asked me many, many times, knowing that I covered Brady for a long time, what's the similarity I see? It's Joe Burrow's ability when the chips are down, when a big play needs to be made, one throw, you need to have him make one critical throw under pressure. He makes it. That's what Brady did. That's what Joe Burrow does. And Joe Burrow has the swagger to know, yeah, I know what this coverage is going to be. I know where Jamar is going to be. I know he's going to release off the inside leverage on the corner and get to the sideline, and I'm going to throw it there. He's going to be there. That's the similarity. That's where the swagger comes from. And the play that comes to mind, it's a subtle one, but it's the one before the game-winning field goal in Tennessee in the divisional round, where Logan Wilson gets the interception off the Eli Apple tip pass off Ryan Tannehill. And Joe Burrow needed to make a play to get Evan McPherson in realistic field goal range. And he throws it out. And he let the ball go before Chase had turned around for it. And it was just the perfect, to me, characterization of what Joe Burrow has under pressure. He doesn't get bothered by big moments. And that's the same with Brady, right? Brady doesn't get bothered by big moments. The only way you ever got to Brady was you got in his face. And in that game, that Tennessee game, they got in his face 9 times, 11 if you really want to be technical about it. And he didn't flinch. He does not flinch, no matter the circumstance. Even down 21-3 2 weeks ago against the Chiefs on the road, he doesn't flinch.
So let me ask you this. Do you think he can still do that if he gets sacked 9 times in a game again? Because that to me is what this game is all about. I
don't think he's going to get sacked 9 times. I don't think they're going to allow him to get hit that many times. He may get sacked 5 times, and I wouldn't be shocked by that at all. I think most Bengal fans coming into this game are expecting at least that, because the Bengals' interior offensive line can't block the pass for crap. They just can't.
Well, so then on the other side, you have one of the best defensive lines in football, Aaron Donald, right? So that matchup to me is the game. To me, it's how can the Bengals do enough to hold off that pass rush and keep Burrow upright for long enough? How do you see that playing out?
So, Evan, what did the Patriots do 3 years ago against that front?
We talked about this. I do think you need to be balanced, right? I do think it's important to run the football a little bit on them, especially if they're going to play 2 high shells just to take out, Chase and Higgins. I think you got to be able to be a little bit balanced so they're not just pinning their ears back. And honestly, in the beginning part of that portion of that game, I think the biggest thing with pass rush, especially regardless if it's Aaron Donald or a guy on the outside like Von Miller, is rhythm, right? You get into a rhythm with your pass rushing ability, and then all of a sudden it just gets to be almost like you're not even thinking, right? Because you get into a zone as an Aaron Donald where you're beating guys. So what the Patriots did early on in that game was they kind of threw the kitchen sink of blocking schemes at Aaron Donald. Dante Scarnecchia was just threw everything at him, right? He was trapping him. He was doubling him. He was chipping him with, the guard would come over, clean him out, and then move over to something else or something like that, the tackle. And they just threw blocking angles at him, right? Guys from different angles, all that kind of stuff. And it threw him off his game. And it got him kind of out of sync with what he was trying to do or what his plan was going into it. And then later on in the game, they were able to go one-on-one with Joe Thuney, right? They were able to not pay so much attention to Aaron Donald. So
right.
I think that early on in the game, whenever you play a guy like Donald, the important thing to do is to do a bunch of different things to kind of throw him and get him a little bit off of his rhythm. Because if he gets into a groove with the pass rush, then he's going to take over the game.
But the Bengals don't have Joe Thuney. They don't have that guy.
You don't need him. You don't need him. How many times did we hear Tom Brady is his own best offensive lineman. How many times Joe Burrow is like that as well, only more mobile and more he has more dexterity. Joe Mixon, his favorite run is the backside zone block run. What I think they're going to try to do on Sunday is you're going to see a wave going off to the right or a wave of blocking going off to the left. Get Aaron Donald lost in that wave, flood him, if you will. And then Mixon's job is going to be wait for a second to 2 seconds longer than he normally does for that wave to wash out and then cut on the backside. That's his touchdown run in the Tennessee game in the divisional round. Go back and watch that run. That's what they're going to try to do with Aaron Donald.
The zone wind back. That's a good player against this team. Any team that's an aggressive front, if you can run a zone wind back, which is basically like you're tossing it out one direction, everybody's flowing in that direction, you get the defense pinned down, and then you cut it back across the grain. Those are the types of plays that could be effective. The Patriots did it with trap schemes, right? So they let Sue and Donald through, and then they would trap him with a lineman coming from a different direction, right? So it seemed like he was unblocked at first, and then they would wham him or they would trap him. Now, they were whamming him with Rob Gronkowski, so it's a little bit different than, maybe what the Bengals personnel is. But those are the types of things the Pats did. So, yeah, misdirection, throwing different blocking angles at him, throwing different people at him. You just can't let him get you one-on-one, right? You just can't let him get one guy singled up and just go after it. It is the matchup of the game in a lot of ways, but the Bengals have weirdly just been immune to pressure in some ways, right? Like the Titans defensive line sacked Joe Burrow 9 times. They couldn't have possibly taken the game over more than what they did. Now it took 3 interceptions by Ryan Tannehill to make that game in the Bengals' favor. I don't know, Matthew Stafford's going to give you 3 picks, but I thought that was fascinating about that game is that even though the Titans D-line did exactly what everybody expected them to do against the Bengals offensive line, it almost didn't matter at the end of the day that they were getting so much pressure on Burrow. I wanted to ask you about the coaching staff on both sides, because this is a matchup to me that tells you about the McVay-Shanahan coaching tree, and the fact that at this point, when you talk about coordinators, you talk about head coaches, and you talk about different branches of this tree, about a third of the league at this point, once upon a time, worked for either Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay. And obviously we have that in this game right now. But Zach Taylor, to me, has done a little bit different with the Bengals offense, I think because of Burrow and his skill set than maybe the typical McVay playbook that he was running when he was with the Rams. But this coaching tree has taken over the league in a lot of ways, Trags. And we know here in Patriot land about copycats, right? How many different Patriots assistants, personnel execs are going around the league and getting jobs riding the coattails of Bill Belichick. Well, here we are in the Super Bowl, and there's 2 McVay guys, McVay himself, and then Zach Taylor. I think it's really fascinating, though, how both guys have adjusted, because McVay, he really saw what the Patriots did in the Super Bowl a few years ago against him, and they started doing some different things. They knew that they couldn't just rely solely on that foundation that they had built. And Zach Taylor, I think, is building an offense in Cincinnati that maybe more resembles like Buffalo and Kansas City than it does necessarily what the Rams and what the Niners do with their run game stuff. They are still zone based, but they're a lot more spread out formations than what McVay typically does with all the condensed stuff.
Here's the deal with Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor has done a tremendous job in the last 18 months of picking and choosing what works for him the best. He will be, I think he is the ultimate hybrid offensive game schemer in the National Football League right now. And he's made that work to his advantage because of what you said. He has the quarterback who can do that. He has the quarterback who understands all of these different concepts. Look, a lot has been made, and, I talked about it earlier about Joe Burrow's pressure, his performance under pressure. He won't flinch. He is an incredibly bright, very quick-thinking quarterback at the line of scrimmage, and he can go to different calls and different schemes on a moment's notice. Not, as you know, both of you know, that it's hard to do that. It's hard to, go from a RPO kind of concept to a wide zone to a more traditional quarterback, what the Patriots have run for years and years and years with Tom Brady. It's difficult to throw all of that into the mix and pick and choose at a moment's notice. Joe Burrow can do that. And I think Zach Taylor has taken advantage of that by picking and choosing different types of offensive attacks. One thing about Zach Taylor that he said a couple of weeks ago, and I thought was very true, he said, if you have a cup of coffee with Sean McVay, you're going to get a head coaching job in the National Football League. Meaning, obviously, Sean McVay is so well known now and has such a reputation throughout football of coaching, having coaches on his staff who are well versed in different offensive schemes. The other thing that somebody brought up to me yesterday, and I get your opinion on this, Evan, what you think of this. It's much easier to hire an offensive head coach than it is a defensive coach. Brian Daboll, for example, versus the Giants going with a defensive guy. Let's say Lou Anarumo, because Lou Anarumo interviewed for the Giants head coaching job, and he's the DC with the Bengals now. It's easier for the Giants to go out and get Daboll and Daboll to build an offense and hire defensively than it is the other way around. You agree with that?
I do agree with it. I do think there's still a place for defensive coaches, and obviously the two right here in the AFC East with Belichick and Sean McDermott have done really, really well as defense coaches, defense first coaches. But the problem that you have is actually, to keep it here with the Bills and the Patriots, is what's going on right now with the Bills and the Patriots, and that is they just lost their offensive coordinators to head coaching jobs. So right. The issue that you have is that if you're a defensive-minded head coach and Josh McDaniels takes the Raiders job and Brian Daboll takes the Giants job, well, now every 3 or 4 years, your quarterback is starting over with a new offensive coordinator and a new play caller. Whereas if you just hire that guy, if you hire a Zach Taylor, if you hire a Sean McVay, if you hire a Brian Daboll, Josh McDaniels, that system stays in place as long as that guy is the head coach. And he's not going to jump ship for another head coaching job, most likely, especially if he's successful. So right. The worry that you have, especially when you're breaking in a young stud
Daniel Jones,
right, is that you're going to keep going and recycling through coordinators because guys are going to keep taking head coaching jobs elsewhere or getting promotions in other places. Obviously, the Patriots have made it work with Bill Belichick, but I think the biggest thing that Belichick allows it to work is that the X's and O's stay the same, regardless of who's the coordinator of the Patriots, whether it's Charlie Weis, Josh McDaniels, Bill O'Brien, or now whatever the heck they end up doing with the coordinator spot, Joe Judge or Bill O'Brien comes back. The playbook and the X's and O's foundation is not going to change just because a different guy is calling the plays this year versus last year. So that sort of continuity allows them to weather the storm. But the Patriots got lucky that McDaniels stuck here for the last decade, right? That nobody came along.
Because of Tom Brady, though. Let's be honest here. That's
right.
Because his relationship
also,
with Tom Brady.
Let's not also forget he was a disaster in Denver. I mean, I think, teams keep hiring these offensive-minded head coaches, and yes, there's 2 of them in the Super Bowl this year, but
I knew Alex was going to disagree with this.
Here we go.
Here's the thing. So first of all right, so you have to keep finding an offensive coordinator. That's just reality in the NFL. And like most teams have to deal with that at most spots. So then have a good quarterback coach, get a pipeline going internally, and you can kind of keep the offensive system. The other thing about it is, yes, McVay's gotten this far, and now Zach Taylor's here, but how many of the coaches from this tree consistently get close and then bail out? Whether it's Matt LaFleur, whether it's Kyle Shanahan, who is, to me, the poster child for great offensive mind, maybe not quite a head coach. I think McVay's a head coach. Taylor, let's see. I mean, he got to the Super Bowl. That's clearly impressive, but I think the idea that you have to have an offensive head coach simply because you can't keep a good offensive coordinator, I don't think that one equals the other. I don't think you should stop yourself from hiring the best possible candidate as a head coach just because you're worried about your coordinator situation. get a good offense coordinator, get a good quarterback coach. When the OC, like, look at what's going on with the Bills, right? Dayball leaves, so what do? They promote
well, let's
Dorsey,
see what happens
right?
with the Bills, though. We don't know. We don't know if Dorsey's any good.
I wouldn't,
we don't know
but here's my point.
Josh Allen back.
I would rather create a strong pipeline behind the coach I believe in, offensive or defensive, than just dismiss half the candidates because, oh, well, I might not have a good offensive coordinator one day, and that would suck. Like, I just think that's a really irresponsible way to hire a coach.
No, I don't disagree with you, but I think the issue is that the brightest offensive minds in football are getting the head coaching jobs. So
no
if you
question
don't,
about that.
If you don't grab one of those guys as a head coach, the likelihood that you're going to get a good coordinator in place, or a sequence of good coordinators after that, is significantly lower, because every single good offensive coach in the league is going to be a head coach within the next 5 years, right? I mean, there's always up and comers. There's always new guys that come down the pipeline. But I think eventually you're going to see a league that's fully dominated by these offensive coaches, and it's going to be really hard to go and find these OCs. And I think that you look at, for example, the Chargers with Justin Herbert. Brandon Staley, for all of his shortcomings as an in-game coach and his decision-makings during the game, is very well renowned for his acumen as a defensive coach. But that's not going to help Justin Herbert in the offense, and that should be your most important asset. So
Justin Herbert's been fine, and the offense has been fine.
It's been fine. I don't know if it's been as good as it possibly could be.
They're not, and I guess I'm kind of hurting my own case here, but this is a separate argument. They're not in the playoffs. The reason they're not in, the reason they didn't make the playoffs isn't because the coach wasn't offensively gifted enough. The reason that they're not in the playoffs is because the coach dry humps a calculator. So
there we go.
Okay, well, let me put it to you this way, Alex. Right?
I'll take a non-mathy offensive coach over a mathy defensive coach any day.
What do you think is better for the development and the trajectory of Justin? Because let's face it, the quarterback's the most important player on the team, right? So what do you think is the best way for the Chargers to move forward? Was to hire Brandon Staley or offer everything under the sun to Brian Daboll to take that job last year? Because I would have much rather Daboll than Staley in that position if I'm Justin Herbert, if I'm the Chargers, if I'm anybody else, because I think that he would be even better than he is now under a guy like Brian Daboll. If he put Justin Herbert in Josh Allen's offense last year, I mean, that offense is just as good with Herbert, right? So I don't know. That's
so then why can't you hire the defensive coach and then go out and get Ken Dorsey to be your OC?
I guess you're just hoping that Ken Dorsey is as good as Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Andy Reid, go right and down the line of the guys that have the head coaching jobs. But I agree with your overall point that you should hire the best coach. And being the head coach is different than being a coordinator, obviously. You're more of a CEO as a head coach. So you have to also put into respect the best leader, the best communicator. Those types of things I think are important to keep in mind outside of just the scheme and the X's and O's. But yeah, I do think right now what we're seeing, especially as McDaniels gets plucked and Daboll gets plucked and all these guys are getting scooped up on the offensive side, it gets really tricky. As Travis is kind of bringing up, it gets really tricky to continue to cycle through coordinators, to continue to find good offensive I'm really fascinated. Like, the Bills have the perfect setup, right? They're going to go to Ken Dorsey, and that's probably going to work out for them. Here in New England, I don't know, right? Like, I don't know where they're going right now at that spot. And if they bring in Bill O'Brien,
go ahead,
Trags.
Okay, yeah.
What's going to happen, and we talked about this a little bit last week, Evan, is you're going to have to find a coordinator that can make the most out of the strengths of Mac Jones, right? I think it's time for the Patriots, if they really want to develop Mac Jones, they've got to let him do what he did best at Alabama, and that's run RPOs, right? Run RPOs, run some stuff off that, and get him back into the comfort zone that he was as a senior at Alabama. He put up prolific numbers in RPO at Alabama, and if the Patriots also want to take a page out of the Bengals book, I think it would behoove them, and Kieran Garigian of the Boston Herald made this point, draft an Alabama wide receiver, put him on the field with Mac Jones, who he played with, and see if you can't generate the same type of on-field chemistry and weaponry that the Bengals clearly have with Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot with John Mechie, who was one of Mac's favorite targets in his senior year at Alabama. And all the struggles that the Patriots have had with drafting wide receivers has always been about learning the playbook, chemistry, those types of things, and not necessarily. I don't necessarily think that N'Keal Harry has no talent, right? I just think that N'Keal Harry was a bad fit in this offense and a bad fit in terms of this program, right? In terms of work ethic and those types of things. You can kind of cut some of those corners by bringing in a guy like Mechie, who has built-in chemistry with Mac Jones, that has familiarity with some of the things the Patriots do, going from Bill O'Brien to the Patriots offense, right? So yeah, I mean, I think we all would love to see that. Jameson Williams didn't play with Mac at Alabama, but when we talk about Mechie, even later in the later rounds, grabbing a guy like Slade Bolden, who I believe was very, very close with Mac at Alabama off the field, right? I think they were really good friends on and off the field. That would kind of be like Tom Brady and Julian Edelman, or Tom Brady and Danny Amendola. They kind of had a bromance, right? And I think that does play a factor in performing on Sunday. Is it the biggest thing? No, obviously talent is the biggest thing. But Burrow and Chase are just at such unison, right off the bat, because they play together and because they've already done this. So yeah, I mean, we would all love that. I think we're all on board with Mechie, Bolden, whoever it is off that Alabama offense that they feel like could be a good pairing. I want to ask you about the Bengals defense. You talked a little bit about the personnel on that side of things. The one stat that really stood out to me previewing this Super Bowl is Matthew Stafford against the Blitz. You don't blitz Matthew Stafford, right? And the Bucs found that out the difficult way a couple weeks ago. That blitzing Matthew Stafford was a losing proposition. Now, the Bengals against the Chiefs used this drop 8, rush 3 type of game plan. And I am wondering if it's just going to be more of the same from Cincinnati against the Rams, and trying to collapse the pocket, keep Stafford at bay, get as much pressure as you can on him with 3 or 4 man rushes, but not dial up very much extra pressure by dropping guys into coverage and trying to play similarly to how they did against Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City last week or 2 weeks ago.
I think it's just I think they're gonna come out and play the same type of defense, or try to schematically play the same kind of defense they did in the second half and overtime against the Chiefs that they did. You're going to see that in the Super Bowl, at least to begin the Super Bowl. Remember, the Bengals have to account for not one but 2 exceptional receivers in Cooper Kupp and OBJ. And Cooper Kupp is a slot receiver, and Mike Hilton could get that assignment off the bat. He's expecting to get that assignment. He's looking forward to the challenge. He talked about that at length yesterday on Wednesday. And, what are the Bengals going to do with OBJ? Are they just going to put Chidobe Awuzie on him? Are they going to bracket him? Are they going to cloud him? Whatever they decide to do, just keep him in front of them. The thing that I like about what the Bengals have coming into this Super Bowl, they have played explosive offenses all season long. They have experience against Kansas City. They have experience against some of the more explosive teams in the National Football League. I think they're going to find a way to keep these receivers in front of them. And, again, when you hold Patrick Mahomes not once but twice to 3 points in the second half of a game, you're doing something right. You're confusing. And they confused Patrick Mahomes in that AFC Championship game. There is no doubt about that. You can say all you want about, that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs blew the game. Well, not really, because Patrick Mahomes just did not look like the same quarterback in the second half. If you can do that to Patrick Mahomes, I think you can do it, or attempt to do it to Matthew Stafford. Ironically, Stafford is obviously the more experienced NFL quarterback, 13 years of experience. It's going to be harder to fool him, but he is still, as I keep going back to that game against the Niners in the NFC Championship, he's going to want to make 1 or 2 or 3 throws he shouldn't be making. And the Bengals need to capitalize on that like they have throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, it feels like the drop 8 strategy is the perfect way to bait him into those types of throws too, because he's going to just be holding the ball back there for a long time, trying to make something happen, right? Trying to get something down the
and
field.
You saw what happened with Patrick Mahomes, Evan, right? In that championship game, Mahomes held on to the ball, and he held on to the ball, and he held on to the ball. And the thing is, with Stafford, he is not the athletic quarterback that Mahomes is. I mean, he can run, certainly make a couple of plays with his legs. He is not what Mahomes is. And I think, that, in addition to, combined with the fact that the Bengals secondary has improved greatly over the course of the season, makes that an advantage for the Bengals. I really do. And people would call me crazy when you're talking about OBJ and Cooper Kupp, but that's the way I think they're going to play it. They know what Cooper Kupp is, and they know how exceptionally talented he is, but they're going to keep him in front of him.
Yeah, if you ask me, you got to bracket Cooper Kupp. He plays inside, so it's easier to bracket him to begin with out of a slot alignment or a condensed alignment. But all of his routes, for the most part, he's got so much freedom, right? Like, you're not, when you play a guy like Cooper Kupp, they're not just like getting into the huddle and being like, Cooper, you're running a slant, right? Like, they don't do that. Like, he pretty much has the choice to run just about any route that he wants. Like, literally, when they run the zero blitz against them in Tampa Bay, he was not supposed to go up the field on that play, right? But he saw the safety over the top creeping down and knew that he could just blow by him based off of that was a completely freelanced route. That wasn't even an option or anything like that. He just did that innately because he knew that he was going to be able to win over the top. You talk about all the option routes and things like that. The best way, and I would also just say that I think the Rams have good depth at receiver. Obviously, Odell is a big factor in this, but you're going to have to get beat by something. Like, you're not going to shut down the entire offense all the time. So with Cooper Kupp, if you do bracket him, then all of his reads from an option route perspective are based off of leverage, right? So if he sees the corner as inside leverage or outside leverage, he's breaking the other way. The problem is that if you bracket him, he doesn't have any leverage reads because there's a guy inside of him and a guy outside of him. So where do you go? And I think that's got to be what they're thinking, is we can't let Cooper Kupp isolate somebody and allow him to just get open at the top of the route. We have to be able to have leverage on both sides of him, because if we allow him to just go one-on-one against someone and shake them at the top of the route, he's going to kill us. It's a lot like Edelman. It's a lot like Wes Welker was. As good as and explosive as OBJ is, Van Jefferson can create big plays as well. They're an offense that runs through Cooper Kupp. And I feel like if you can take him away and you can force them to just go to their other complementary receivers, I really feel like that's your best bet. So I would bracket him. Whatever happens with OBJ happens with OBJ, right? If he goes off for 200 yards and has a throwback OBJ game, then I think you kind of have to tip your cap at that point and hope that Joe Burrow can keep up on the other side of the ball.
The one thing I want to bring up about the Bengals receivers, as big a player and as much of a binky as Jamar is for Joe Burrow, do not sleep on Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Those guys.
I wanted to ask you about this. So wait.
Go.
I want to ask you about X factors in this matchup, right? Guys that are not Cooper Kupp, not Aaron Donald, some of these X factors. The one X factor that I really thought of was T. Higgins, right? I mean, Darius Williams is probably going to be the outside corner on him with the Rams. Higgins had a great run in the playoffs. I'm sure they'll have something ready for Chase, right? That whether it's just Ramsey against him or having Ramsey and help or whatever the case may be. T. Higgins feels like a guy that is like a low-key, could have a monster game in this matchup. So
what I heard from a couple of people who cover the Rams is that do not be surprised if the Rams and Sean McVay throw something different at the Bengals and they put Ramsey on, kind of like what Belichick used to do, put Ramsey on T. Higgins and bracket Jamar Chase. And then if that is the case, that opens up Tyler Boyd underneath, and Tyler Boyd could just have an exceptionally huge game on Sunday. So, that's why I think having three receivers the way the Bengals do coming into this game presents all types of problems. I mean, three elite receivers at their position group. And, that's the way the Bengals were built. That's why they drafted the way they have the last couple of seasons. T. Higgins was the draft pick after Joe Burrow in the 2020 draft. Obviously, Jamar Chase was the number 5 overall pick last year. And this is the moment where that kind of drafting bears the fruit. At least the Bengals hope so.
Well, so let me ask you this. You're talking about the matchups, and I haven't looked in the last couple hours, so I apologize if I missed something. But CJ Uzomah, how big of do you think he plays, and how big of an absence is he if he doesn't play?
He plays.
Okay.
I think
decoy or for real?
I don't know. I mean, no, really, that's guesswork at this point. We don't know how CJ Uzomah is really feeling, right, Alex? I mean, until we see him on the field in the game, we don't know. If he is 75% even, I think that's a big deal because Uzomah has been a big third down weapon for Joe Burrow. Great release player. And he's not Gronk, but he can play some of the or run some of those same routes that Gronk ran, and he chips off the line of scrimmage very well. He will be used against Von Miller to chip and then release off that. He could, if he's reasonably healthy, he could also be a big factor in the game, especially in the red zone. He had, the first touchdown of the playoffs for the Bengals on that dot that Burrow threw against the Raiders in the first quarter. That was a big moment for the Bengals because, the Raiders had scored. It was only 3-0 Vegas, but there was starting to be this nervousness. Here we go. Vegas marched right down the field. The defense stopped them enough, held them to a field goal, but the Bengals were down. Next drive, Bengals go right down the field, get the touchdown, the throw to CJ Uzomah in the red zone on third down, because the Bengals have had their trouble in the low red area. Keep an eye on that on Sunday. Very hard for them to run the ball in the red area. But that throw to Uzomah was a big one. It really got them on their way in that game.
The other X factor I wanted to ask you about, Trags, is I think a player that deserves a lot more attention with this Bengals run, and that's DJ Reader, who has taken over at times in the playoffs in the middle of the defense and really just been a rock that you can't move off the line of scrimmage, and the run game gets penetration too at times as a pass rusher on the interior. This Rams offensive line has always been greater than the sum of its parts, right? Andrew Whitworth is a great player. I don't know if the rest of those guys are necessarily, Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber linemen, but they got a good scheme that protects their offensive linemen a lot. But Reader has been an absolute force. I feel like he's a guy that could be a potential game wrecker for the Bengals.
He could be. And I will tell you this, when the Bengals traded their backup center behind a center who had knee issues coming into the season in Trey Hopkins, people kind of raised their eyebrow. Like, if Trey Hopkins isn't able to go, or he struggles or gets re-injured or whatever, he's just not himself, what are you going to do? You're going to go with a rookie center in Trey Hill. You're going to put a rookie center in front of Joe Burrow. But the reason they traded Billy Price was to get to B.J. Hill from the New York Giants. He has been huge next to Reader when Larry Ogunjobi got hurt against the Raiders. And the combination of Reader and B.J. Hill is something to watch on Sunday because they have been very, very disruptive. If the Bengals had Ogunjobi in this game, that I would be much more confident that the Bengals would be able to stop the run game of the Rams. I still think they'll be able to do a good job, but it's like the Patriots. The Patriots love to, in the Bill Belichick era, throw waves and waves of two-gap defensive tackles in there at a time. And the Bengals even will use Tyler Shelvin, big, massive nose tackle.
I loved Shelvin in the draft. I thought that was a nice nose tackle for the Patriots.
He was a little bit out of shape when he got to the Bengals. He's gotten into shape. Yeah. They were hard on him. DJ Reader was one of the guys who really got on Tyler to get himself into shape. And he's actually played he has actually played significant snaps in the postseason, which I think has surprised anybody who has covered the Bengals. No, everybody thought that Tyler Shelvin was going to take his rookie year as a red shirt and he'd come back next year in better shape. But no, they have used him quite a bit, and they have used a couple of other players in there when Larry Ogunjobi got hurt in the playoffs. They've really piecemealed that defensive line together quite well.
So let me ask you this, kind of an external X factor here. And this, I know you hate thinking about the game this way, but this is how I like to think about it. So you're going to put up with me.
There we go.
It feels to me
just like old times.
It feels to me coming into this game, the Bengals are playing with house money. The Rams gave up all those first-round picks. They signed all those big contracts.
Yeah.
This is their window. This is it. The Bengals, to me, when they kind of went through that it was the middle of the year, right, where they struggled a little bit. It felt like they were getting tight.
Yeah.
Does it help the Bengals that it's almost like, hey, we can be back here. We're just in the beginning of our window versus the Rams who have to win this game? You don't think that lets the Bengals play any looser? No.
No.
All right.
I think the reason I say that, Alex, is you get to the Super Bowl, you're there to win the Super Bowl. You're not thinking about.
I know.
And I don't
think
they are looking at it. Oh, here, whatever happens, they were going to play relaxed, and if we don't win, all right. That's not their attitude. No.
It shouldn't be, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm more so saying, do you think the pressure gets to the Rams easier than it gets to the Bengals? I'm saying I think. Because there is something to be said. Patriots players have talked about this. You have to enjoy the process. Do you think maybe it's a little easier for the Bengals to enjoy the process of this week than the Rams?
The only way the pressure gets to the Rams is if they fall behind 10-0, 14-0 in their own building, and they have veterans who are brought in for this express purpose of winning the Super Bowl, and they're down early, and then the Bengals are playing free and loose. There's something to your point there. I do buy that a little bit, but that is very conditional on the way the game plays out, right? But I mean, going into the game, I don't think it factors at all.
So let me ask you this then. How much does it help the Bengals, not just that they won, obviously they won last week, that's why they're in the game, but to win in the manner that they did?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think winning on wiping out an 18-point deficit on the road at Arrowhead,
right,
on top of and beating the number 1 seed on the road in Tennessee, those are big feathers in the cap, and those are the kind of wins that tell you, look, if the crap hits the fan in the first quarter and we're down, let's say 14-0, we're not going to panic. We got the quarterback. We know we can come back. We don't want to be in that position, but if that's what happens, if a turnover happens, and God forbid there's a pick six like Brady went through in Super Bowl 51. If that happens, they're not going to crumble. I can guarantee you that. And that's what, and I keep saying this, having covered the Patriots for so long, the thing that has impressed me about this Bengal team, you're talking about a Bengal team that was down 14 points 3 different times in a game they needed to clinch the division to Kansas City at Paul Brown Stadium. They won that game. Tennessee had the game in their hands, in Ryan Tannehill's hands, with a chance to win at Tennessee in the divisional. Bengals came up with the play. They won the game. Bengals down 21-3. And I had somebody next to me, protect his identity, he's a good friend of mine, say, if the Chiefs go down and score on this drive, it's church, meaning it's game over.
Right.
And they scored, and it was 21-3. And I went, I don't think so. I don't think this game's over. And, when the Bengals came back and got that Samaje Perine run, they got themselves immediately back into the game. And then Eli Apple makes that tackle on Tyreek Hill. They have that something where they believe whatever happens in the game, good or bad, they're going to have a chance eventually in the end to win it.
It's an interesting conversation, though, about Sean McVay that Alex was getting at, though, because I remember he did a lot of reflecting on why he lost to the Patriots in his first Super Bowl. And he talked about in that, he wrote a story with SI. He did a lot of press about it. He talked about it, and he said that he was going back years in Patriots film to comb through what Belichick did in this big game and what Belichick did in that big game. And he got so lost in the weeds of the whole thing. And I think the one thing that he really pointed to was the extra week, right? So he had all this extra time to go ahead and waste his time, essentially. Looking back at the 16 Super Bowl against Kyle Shanahan was a big one, because obviously it's a somewhat similar system that Shanahan was running with Atlanta. So he went back and looked at what the Falcons did, and it's a totally different team, right? I mean, there's no relevance really. And I'm wondering if he's learned from his mistakes, right? And I wonder, especially going up against a coaching staff like the Bengals and Zach Taylor that know him extremely well, if he outsmarts himself again. And
I
that would
do
be
wonder
one
that.
thing.
I do
that
wonder
I would
that.
be concerned about with the Rams, is that he's going to come out and get away from what they do as a team, because he's going to be like, Zach Taylor's going to know I'm going to run wide zone. Zach Taylor is going to know that I'm going to run empty. Zach Taylor is going to know that I'm going to, run these 4 or 5 core passing plays. So we're actually going to go to our secondary group of plays, and maybe we haven't practiced those as much, and maybe they're not as ready to run them in a game. So this is a tough draw to draw Bill Belichick, and then to draw a guy that's super familiar with you the second time around in the Super Bowl with Zach Taylor it's tough for McVay. And I wonder how much from the first experience he's going to take away and learn this second time around. The first time I actually thought against the Patriots, he was too predictable. They just did exactly what they had done all year long, and that's exactly what Bill Belichick game planned for. Now I wonder if he goes the total opposite direction, and if that's actually a good thing or a bad thing for the Rams, in this game.
Well, it depends on how much, you can go in a different direction, but if you're still using your primary weapons and having them involved to make plays, then, I think that's a good thing for the Rams and McVay. The area where you get into trouble is if you start outsmarting yourself and don't use your weapons, and don't get Cooper Kupp in the game right away, or don't get OBJ involved right away, and don't attack the Bengals where their primary weakness is on defense, and that's the linebackers. Look, Logan Wilson's a very fundamentally sound run stopper. He's great downhill. Jermaine Pratt's had a very good year. But the Bengals can be attacked with the short passing game over the middle. And
those are two guys I watch a lot in the draft. I thought maybe the Patriots a little bit more athletic, but still have some size to them to stop the run, right? But they're not They're not Jawan Bentleys. Like they're not plotters out there. Neither one of them were drafted by the Patriots. Now they're playing in the Super Bowl with the Bengals. Trags, who's the X factor? Who's the guy that scares you the most on the Rams? Like if there's one player, who's the guy that makes you have long sleepless nights if you're Zach Taylor and the Bengals coaching staff in this game?
Cooper Kupp. I mean, you can't say it. I mean, if you're asking me somebody other than Cooper Kupp, probably Van Jefferson. He's not getting a lot of attention. And, what concerns me is how do the Rams isolate Eli Apple? Because Eli Apple can get beat over the top, and he has. And that's where I think Sean McVay is going to try to attack this Bengals defense. You're going to see a lot of passes directed towards Eli Apple early in this game.
Eli Apple likes to talk some smack, and I'm curious. Do Bengals fans like that? Like, like in Boston, we all love Brad Marchand. Like he's a pest, right? But we all love him because he's Brad Marchand. Do Bengals fans feel the same way about Eli Apple, or are they kind of like, you're Eli Apple, like maybe go sit in the corner for a little bit?
Hot and cold. Look, Eli made a great play in the Tennessee game that helped him win the game. There's no doubt about that. He dropped the pick 6 in overtime on Mahomes on second down. Everybody remembers the interception that Jesse Bates tips the ball to Von Bell and sets up the game-winning field goal. The right before that, it was Eli Apple with a chance to intercept Patrick Mahomes, easily run it into the end zone. Game's over at that moment. Bengal fans get a little nervous when you talk Eli Apple. It's hot and cold. I'm trying to think of a good Patriot comparison to a player in the secondary over the years. I don't know if Asante Samuel is a good analogy or not, because
Eli Apple was never that good. Yeah.
Right. But he is that kind of like hot and cold player. Chidobe Awuzie has had his struggles in the playoffs. Somebody also that could be picked on a little bit in this game on Sunday. And that, I think, concerns Bengals fans. I mean, if you've been watching these games closely, Awuzie has struggled at times to keep up with the number one receiver. So how the Bengals, if they go with pattern match zoning or, the 8 drop, like you said, Evan, they're going to have to find a way to kind of put these two cornerbacks, Awuzie and Apple, in comfort zones where they have some protection over you're not going to be able to protect both of them over the top, but you're going to have to put them in positions where they feel comfortable on the outside.
All right, Trags, give us your game pick. We gotta put you on the spot. You can't pick the Bengals. No, I'm just kidding. You can pick the Bengals if you want to pick the Bengals, but who you got in this game? And do you see it close game, blowout? What are you looking at?
Look, Evan McPherson comes onto the field in a 21-21 game, says, looks like we're going to be hoisting the Vince Lombardi trophy, just like he said about we're going to the AFC Championship. I think the Bengals win it on a last-second Evan McPherson field goal, and he breaks Adam Vinatieri's 2006 NFL postseason record with his 15th field goal in the postseason. 24-21 Bengals.
So you're going full 2001 Patriots analogy with this, I can tell.
Pretty much. It's I look. I mean, I got to tell you, you both know this. This team has a lot of similarities with that 2001 team, but a quarterback who's probably Brady himself acknowledged that Joe Burrow, as a number 1 overall pick, has more tools and is much further along in his second NFL season than Brady was when Brady led them to the win over the greatest show on turf. So I do see the similarities. I see 24-21 Bengals. It's going to be a rock fight early, and then in a lot, as is the case in a lot of these games, guys, and you know this, it starts out defensively, then it ramps up into an offensive shootout, kind of like Super Bowl 38, Carolina and the Patriots.
Underrated game.
Very underrated game. And the Patriots won that 32-29 on a last-second Vinatieri field goal. So that's the way I see this one going.
Well, now look, I'm rooting for the Bengals. Who doesn't root for the team with no Super Bowls, right? Like, you always want to see them win a Super Bowl championship. And the fans out in LA that do exist are very few and far between. So I'd much rather see a diehard fan base that suffered a long time win this game. And Trags, thanks so much for joining us. We always love having you on. And enjoy LA, enjoy the weather. It is nice out here today in Boston. I will say that. I think we're 50 degrees.
Is that right?
I think we're at 50 degrees. So not terrible.
It's not 78. Not 78 and sunny, but it's not bad.
No, I feel like you're obligated to talk about the weather. If you're talking to somebody out at the Super Bowl in LA and you're back here in the Northeast, you have to ask about the weather. So,
well, look, it's just evening out for it, because I remember, Evan, this before when you were with CLNS, when Trags was covering the Super Bowl in Minnesota, and I had to edit all his videos he was shooting there and having to cut out all the in-between takes when he's just grumbling about how cold it was. So I guess it evens out.
Yeah, yes, it wasn't really that warm in Atlanta from what I remember.
No,
I think it was like unseasonably cold.
Remember they closed school one day because it was like 30. It wasn't snowing. It was just 30 degrees. So they closed the schools.
A rare cogent point from Alex Barth. That is an excellent point, Alex. I do remember that.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, Trags, enjoy the game. Try to revel in this one a little bit, and have a good time watching it. And we wish the Bengals nothing but the best. I said I'm rooting for the Bengals. I don't know if I'm taking the Bengals. I'm 50-50 on that. Alex, what about you?
I think it's a high-scoring game. I think it's close, but I think the Rams pull away late. I'm going 38-28 Rams.
Oh, that's a high number. I like that. All right. Well,
number.
We got to let Trags go. Trags, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We love you, and we'll have you on again soon.
Back at you guys. Thanks for having me.
And thanks so much, everybody else, for tuning in to this afternoon edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on Patriots Press Pass. Alex and I will be back on Tuesday to recap the Super Bowl, talk some more Patriots. We didn't talk much Patriots today, so we'll talk all Patriots next week, but we wanted to get in a very important Super Bowl preview with our guy, Mike Petraglia. So thanks once again to Trags for joining us from Los Angeles, and we'll see everybody Tuesday.